Good morning, everyone. I'm Ralph Dice. I'm president of Dice & Company. I want to welcome you to our Senior Executive Thought Leader Forum this morning on what looks like a very nice spring morning. Hallelujah and amen. Before I really get started, I really need to plug the film that our good friend Steve Hacker on the camera back there, his film will be in the 39th Cleveland International Film Festival, and it's showing March 25th March 25th at 9:20. And let me see if I can get this right. On a technicality, a preposterous bet and its unexpected consequences. 5 men make a bet and live or die to see what happens. So be sure to catch On a Technicality. So now you know what my alternative career is. Who said that? So once again, welcome. We've been conducting these Senior Executive Thought Leader Forums for over 10 years now. And the reason we do this is because we are fully committed to leadership in Northeast Ohio. We're committed to the growing value of human capital in Northeast Ohio, and what's really happening right now is a renaissance that 10 years ago I think would never have been able to foresee. And Dice & Company plays a key role in Northeast Ohio where human capital is concerned. When companies are looking to bring key people into their organizations, they call on us to help them find those people. When those people need to be coached to be more effective in leadership, they call on us to coach those people. And when inevitably somebody needs to be removed from an organization, they call on us to help that person find a new job. And we consider that a privilege to be serving our friends, neighbors, and colleagues here in Northeast Ohio, and we consider you to be among those friends, neighbors, and colleagues. So once again, welcome. We're very pleased to have an important leader here today to speak to us, and I'm going to ask Greg Reynolds to introduce that very important leader.
Thank you, Ralph. Before I do, I want to call your attention to a handout that we put at your place settings this morning. Ralph mentioned that we've been doing these thought leaders for over 10 years. Today actually marks the anniversary of the first Thought Leaders Forum, which was a small gathering of, I think, of about 10 or 12 of us in the parlor down the hall here on the 3rd floor. And it's evolved into well over 300 leaders participating at various times during the year. And as you can see, we've put together just a blockbuster schedule of programs this year. We led off this year with Bruce Hennis's partner, Barbara Painter, and she talked about managing communications during a crisis. Again, we have Gary here this morning, Gary Norton, the mayor of East Cleveland. In May, just wrapped this up yesterday, Dan Malthrick, many of you know Dan or know of Dan. For years he hosted, he was the founding host of Sound of Ideas on IdeaStream. Most recently, he's become the CEO now in 13, I think it was. at the City Club. He's met a lot of unique leaders, some who've been in the spotlight, some not. And he's going to be talking about his observations of leadership from that. In July, Chris Thompson from the fund, excuse me, from the Director of Regional Engagement from the Fund for Our Economic Future. And Chris is going to be talking about the impact of leadership on our region, and he's identified two distinctly different styles of leadership. In September, Jody Burke, fourth generation leader of Vitamix, and what marvelous things she's done in her role rather than sit back and let that company be a lifestyle for she and her family, a lifestyle business. And she's going to be talking about lessons that she's learned. And then Bernie Moreno. Somebody said, who's Bernie Moreno? Well, I said, have you ever heard of the Collection Auto Group? Bernie has just, Tracy Lind, I think, commented, he rebranded himself to himself. He's now calling it the Bernie Moreno Companies. And but he's very active civically. He took a Sleepy dealership in North Olmsted and turned it into 20 some locations and 15 dealerships around the country. They've been voted, they have over 1,000 employees. They've been voted the best employer. He's been selected as a best leader, and so he'll be bringing a lot of his insights to us as well. So mark your calendars now for the second Tuesday in May, July, September, and November, and plan on being with us. So I want you to imagine a scenario. You're the mayor of a community of 24,000 citizens, half the population it was in the 50s when it was known as the Beverly Hills of the North Coast. A series of events over the years before you were elected have left your city in a sea of fiscal red ink. In fact, you're facing bankruptcy. You've described your options as bad, really bad, and devastating. I want you to think about what it would be like to wake up in the crosshairs of snipers, and notice I said snipers, not a sniper, every morning. The snipers include most they also include some of your constituents who not only blame you for the ills that you're dealing with, but want you impeached. Can you imagine getting up every... You've described your options as bad, really bad, and devastating. I want you to think about what it would be like to wake up in the crosshairs of snipers, and notice I said snipers, not a sniper, every morning. The snipers include most of your city council. They also include some of your constituents who not only blame you for the ills that you're dealing with, but want you impeached. Can you imagine getting up every morning and not wondering whether or not you're going to get shot at, but who's going to shoot at you? Well, this is the life of Gary Norton. He's got a great job. He's the city mayor for East Cleveland. His story which some of us heard at a Bridge Builders event, which is an offshoot of the Cleveland Leadership Center that we co-sponsored in January. His story is one of leadership in crisis. And we invited him to be with us to share his story today because it's one of selfless leadership and a conviction to do what is right, not for himself, but for the greater good. So one thing Gary has asked is that he's going to be sharing some things with you that are not out for publication yet. So we're going to invoke, it's okay to keep taping, Steve, but we're going to invoke a cone of silence here this morning with the Las Vegas, what's said here stays here. Okay? So without further ado, please welcome Gary Norton.
Good morning. Thank you, Greg. I've never been introduced like that. And it's very true. There are lots of snipers. There's no money. And it's about wondering which one of them is going to shoot you. I think about 10 of them actually do shoot me every single day. But it's just a different 10 every day, so I can't blame anybody in particular. But thank you so much for the kind introduction and the invitation, and for the breakfast. A guy who goes to battle every day certainly needs a warm breakfast and good people, so I appreciate that. And Ralph, are you... There you go, okay. Thank you again for the invitation and to treating everybody. I was a little bit confused a few minutes ago. You said that there was an important speaker, so I thought, hey, aren't I supposed to be a speaker today? But no, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. And for the cone of silence, thank you all for abiding by the rule that what happens here stays here. Kind of a silly thing to say when there's a videotape going, but that's okay. And but you know, the only exception to that would be you can tell people with power, influence, and money, if you wish, the things that we say today. But you know, everybody, many of us who are locals, some of those who were transplants to the area, know the story of the city of East Cleveland. We know the story of East Cleveland for whatever period of years we tend to think about it. So this year, we know the story of East Cleveland for the past few years, which is fiscal emergency, auditors coming in, saying that the city's on the brink of bankruptcy, there's talk about merger. Now, what's interesting to me is I read an article recently in Cleveland Magazine, a very good publication with good writing, several pages to me. The teaser in the magazine, which is at the top, essentially said, East Cleveland, a community that was once home to the super rich, not just the rich, but the super rich, i.e. John D. Rockefeller, has been plunged into fiscal and political ruin. I just read that article in Cleveland Magazine, but it was written in 1986. Recently, I read a study about the city of East Cleveland that talked about housing trends. What it was called rapid resegregation. 1 year, East Cleveland was 70% white in population. 4 years later, it was 70% black. That happened between 1968 and 1972. So when I say we know about East Cleveland, we know about it for a chunk of 3 or 4 years at a time. What I have to grasp is that East Cleveland is roughly 100 years old, And this trend has been happening for about half of its lifetime. And when a trend happens for half of your lifetime, or for 50 years in our case, it finally comes to a head. And when we look at it intelligently, and when we take out of it the individuals, in politics we have a tendency to blame one another. Does everybody disagree with that? Okay, I don't. We have a tendency to blame somebody. Somebody has to be to blame for the circumstance in which we find ourselves. Somebody has to be to blame. Is it the right person? Sometimes it is, other times it isn't. But in a city's 100-year history, if 50 years of that has been spent in decline, I would argue that there is no single person and no group of people to blame for that. Some of these things happened when I was in junior high school, others of them happened when I was in elementary school, others of them happened when my parents were in junior high school. So there's not a single individual or a group of individuals that we can blame. Having been the mayor of East Cleveland for about 5 years, which I guess if I broke a mirror at some point in my life, I'm 2 years away from the end of that sentence. I've realized this. I have fought politicians. I have fought political groups. I have fought businesses. I have fought for businesses. I have fought for political groups. I have fought for politicians. All the fighting is for naught when there's a system failure. In East Cleveland, what I recognize now is that there are certain assumptions that are set up in Ohio for a city to exist. A city is set up to provide what is really the bedrock of the American dream for people in our communities. The American dream is that you can succeed and you can go anywhere you want to go, you can do anything you want to do, you will be safe, your investments will be safe, you can live a good life, and you can get a good education, and you can take care of your family. That's the American dream. Cities deliver that through police protection, through quality schools, through good infrastructure, through providing good homes with good value and good neighbors so we can all live together as communities and be the best Americans that we can be. The federal government doesn't deliver that to your doorstep. The state government doesn't deliver that to your doorstep. The county government doesn't deliver that to your doorstep. The city government delivers that to your doorstep. And as a mayor, it's pretty cool to know that you can be the guy or woman who's responsible for delivering the American dream throughout your community. But there are certain things that are true in 99.9% of the cases that are not necessarily true in the city of East Cleveland anymore. Cities are set up to run, for the most part, on income taxes, with some property tax thrown in, with some fees for trash removal and things like that thrown in, with a few grants thrown in, and with another support or two thrown in. Pretty much sets up a city to run financially, provide police officers, provide ambulances, provide fire trucks, make sure your streets are in good shape. Don't count the streets in good shape in March, by the way. That's more like a summer type of thing. But we remove snow, we remove trash, all those things. If the city's going well, you don't even think about what your city does. But when the basic formula of you have a certain population, you've got some businesses in your city, you generate some income taxes, your property values are relatively stable, and you can count on these revenues to provide things. When that formula goes wrong, people start to pay attention. For the past 4 decades in East Cleveland's history, those system assumptions have begun to be eroded. East Cleveland's population in the 1970s was 40,000 people. Today it's 16,000. Imagine if your customer base went from 40,000 to 16,000. It might have an effect on revenue. You think? Maybe? Unless those 16,000 are willing to pay a whole lot more. If your customer base goes from 40,000 to 16,000, it might also impact the level of service that you can provide to each of those remaining 16,000 customers. There's something called an economy of scale. In Ohio, not only that, we have experienced diminishment in our city funding streams. Anybody ever heard of a place called Huron Hospital? Okay, you know it doesn't exist anymore. It's now a field. The Cleveland Clinic some years ago closed Huron Hospital. Anybody from the Cleveland Clinic in here, by the way? Good, I can tell the truth. I'm kidding. Sort of. Cleveland Clinic is a wonderful organization, a world-class healthcare provider, and they had a satellite hospital in the city of East Cleveland. But Cleveland Clinic changed its business model. The Cleveland Clinic changed the way that it provides healthcare in the 21st century and in Northeast Ohio. Everybody loves change, but sometimes that change comes to you. Everybody loves change, everybody wants change, but nobody wants to be changed. When the Cleveland Clinic decided to change the way that it delivers healthcare in Northeast Ohio, that was our day to be changed. The closure of Huron Hospital took $1.5 million out of East Cleveland's revenues annually. So in addition to the decades-old non-functioning funding formula for cities that did not work in East Cleveland anymore, an additional $1.5 million was stripped out, which is the equivalent of about 10% of our budget. The next year, everybody loves tax cuts, and everybody wants the state of Ohio to be more financially responsible, and everybody wants a surplus created at the state of Ohio. So a certain governor decided to do that. He created a surplus at the state of Ohio by no longer sending local government revenue to cities where state revenues are generated in the first place. They just kept it at the state of Ohio. East Cleveland lost another $1.5 million that way, about another 10% of our budget. In 2 years, those two things happened to us. What we have to recognize is that that is not a mayor's fault. That is not the city council's fault. That is no individual or group's fault. It's a change in the way that we do things. On the private side in healthcare, the Cleveland Clinic changed the way that it does business. That change affected the city of East Cleveland. Some people said that it was racially motivated and said that it was done because low-income people use the hospital, and the Cleveland Clinic just wanted to get out of the business of serving low-income people. But a few weeks ago, they announced the closure of Lakewood Hospital. So those business decisions do change communities. Everybody thinks it's a good thing for the state of Ohio to cut back on its expenses and use more things for more money for things that the state needs, or actually to create a surplus to have the state in better financial shape. That's a good thing. But it affects cities and affects us by taking revenue away from cities. So these changes that are good in the world actually come home to roost in other places. And what leadership has to do is understand the reality and understand that this is a system problem. And that if nothing is done about it in the case of my city, revenues will continue to diminish, people will continue to move out, businesses will continue to move out. The jobs that people used to have in the city of East Cleveland and in many cities were based in the auto industry and manufacturing. Those jobs have disappeared from the United States of America, never to return. We cannot, as a community, continue to hope for the return of residents. We can no longer, as a community, continue to hope for the return of jobs. We must address the economic circumstances from a system standpoint instead of blaming individuals. So why do I tell you all of that? I let you off easy because I didn't give you the long version. Believe it or not, that's the short version. But the end of it is this. Sometimes the best thing you can do, if your goal as an elected official and as a mayor is to ensure that that American dream is delivered to men, women, and children within your borders to the best of your ability, and that your job as a mayor is to ensure that it is not only delivered within your borders today, but for the next 50 and 100 years. You must make the decision to set up the structure so it works, that it will outlive you, even when it means putting yourself out of work. So all of this talk about mergers, it's about time that we do that. For the last 30 years, that conversation has been held. But a deep-held secret of elected officials, unspoken, in fact, probably unacknowledged ever, unless we're talking about other elected officials, who would then be politicians, is that politicians often preserve their own position and preserve their own authority and preserve their own influence at any expense, including diminished service to the people and continuing to operate a city government that should not be operated anymore, both from a financial standpoint and a service standpoint, and ultimately delivering the American dream. So one of the things you've guessed that I'll talk with you about today is my plan to participate in the merger, potentially, hopefully, cross my fingers, of the city of East Cleveland with the city of Cleveland. Many people think that we'd like to split up the cities, have the upper part of the hill go to Cleveland Heights, have the lower part of the city go to Cleveland. To me, that represents social inequity. You have to look out for people. And what's good enough for one city is good enough for one city. There is not any further socio-economic discrimination that needs to be visited upon the people of the city of East Cleveland, particularly their mayor, who's putting them through this painful process. We are beginning our conversations with the community. This must be voted on by the people. It will probably be, if the current law stands, it will be at least a 2-year process. It's excruciating. There is room for a poison pill at many, many places in this process, and if it fails at any step, it will have to be begun all over again. I'm crazy. Well, I'm half crazy, which for East Cleveland mayors, half crazy is an improvement. But I am half crazy. For me, it is a political suicide walk. I'm doing something that today is unpopular among my own constituents. But I am convinced that doing the right thing will be the right decision and it will pass. It ultimately has to be passed by the voters. I'll outline the process for you very quickly because I know you probably have several questions. But everybody talks about merger. You notice that? Everybody, raise your hand if you've heard about a merger involving the city of East Cleveland. Okay, everybody, right? You ever heard how to do it? It's easy to say. You know, it's kind of the breakfast thing. You know, you're going to bring the eggs, the chicken brings the eggs to the breakfast, the pig brings the bacon. You know, it's easy to bring the eggs if you're the chicken, but the pig bringing the bacon, that's a different story. I'm the pig bringing the bacon to the merger thing. But nobody ever says how to do it. So I looked it up. It's a pretty complicated process, extremely difficult process. But I am going to engage in it. It begins with a piece of legislation, a city council resolution from the city of East Cleveland's city council, which Greg told you about earlier. Was Greg? Greg told you my council loves me. They don't. They hate me. It's like going to a fan club meeting every week. I love it. I get to be told everything about myself. The city council could pass a resolution to the Cleveland City Council requesting that Cleveland enter annexation negotiations with the city of East Cleveland. My council will not do that. Anybody, by the way, they decided to try to recall me last week. Anybody? Yeah, I'll sign the petition myself right now. I don't care. I basically am signing it through going through this process. So they could do that. That would be the easy way. But they won't. Another way to do it is a petition circulated and signed by a certain number of voters in the city of East Cleveland. Once that petition is complete, that petition gets submitted to the city council. And the city council, based on that petition, is then compelled to send that same resolution to the city of Cleveland, asking Cleveland to enter annexation negotiations with us. Now, the funny part about this is the city council is compelled because the state law says that if a city council receives such a petition, then the city council shall, anybody who's a lawyer, your eyes light up when you see that word shall in the law, shall pass this resolution. But what's going to be hilarious is that my city council doesn't really read the law, so they will think that they're elected representatives who never have to be forced to vote a certain way on anything. So you might see my city council hauled into court and the judge tells them that they have to pass this resolution. So it will be political theater extraordinaire when we do this. That's just the first part of it. So once we pass that resolution from our city council, it goes to Cleveland City Council. Cleveland City Council can vote to enter the negotiations with us. They can also tell us, go take a hike. And then I'm just out of a job for nothing. But we hope that Cleveland City Council will agree to enter the annexation negotiations with us. When that happens, a commission is formed. The commission consists of 6 people. 3 people appointed by East Cleveland City Council, 3 people appointed by Cleveland City Council. Now, my council is completely opposed to this. We had to drag them to court. We'll probably have to drag them to court to make them pass the resolution in the first place. Then it's their power to appoint 3 people to the commission. Now, what type of people do you think they're going to appoint to this commission? If they appoint anybody at all, So there's a tremendous delay there and perhaps some friction. Cleveland, I expect that Cleveland will appoint reasonable, rational people to this. That commission forms a plan. They have 4 months to do that. That plan goes to the election, just in the city of East Cleveland. The plan for annexation developed by this commission goes back to the people of East Cleveland to have their vote. Assuming that that vote is a yes vote, the ball's kicked back to Cleveland City Council. And I'll wrap up and go to questions in about 30 seconds. Cleveland City Council, now I'm a political science guy, I'm a local government guy. Cleveland City Council at that point has two options. One of them is amazing to me. Cleveland City Council can A, order an election for the entire city of Cleveland on that plan to see if the entire city of Cleveland votes to merge with the entire city of East Cleveland. Or Cleveland City Council, and this is the interesting part to me, can vote to accept East Cleveland's results and waive the entire election for the city of Cleveland and just annex the city of East Cleveland. So